If there is one way that evangelicals want to be presented in my experience, it is that they are people of truth. Evangelicals focus, for example, on the words of Jesus in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. The words in Acts 4:12, there is no other name by which you are saved. And they go out to the world and they boldly proclaim this truth, that we are people of truth and we proclaim the truth of the Messiah to you. And there's abundant evidence of that within evangelical subculture and writing. So, for example, the Truth Project from Focus on the Family, John MacArthur, The Truth War, Douglas Groothuis, Truth Decay, Total Truth, Whatever Happened to Truth, True Truth, Engaging Current Issues with Timeless Truth, The Wedge of Truth. This is just a small selection of books, and in the case of the Truth Project, of a curriculum from evangelical subculture that focuses on truth, and that evangelicals are fighting to defend the truth in a world of subjectivism, postmodern relativism, and lies. Well, Philip Yancey, some years ago in his book, What's So Amazing About Grace, he talks about how evangelicals, in his experience, are perceived. This is back in 1997, he wrote this. Mark Twain used to talk about people who were good in the worst sense of the word, a phrase that for many captures the reputation of Christians today. And I might add, in parentheses, evangelicals in particular. Recently, he said, I have been asking a question of strangers, for example, seatmates on an airplane, when I strike up a conversation. When I say the words evangelical Christian, what comes to mind? In reply, I mostly hear political descriptions of strident pro-life activists or gay rights opponents or proposals for censoring the internet. Not once have I heard a description redolent of grace. Now, can we just recognize that that is a problem? If you want to talk about truth all the time, but you're not viewed as reflecting grace, as being like Jesus, who himself is the truth, that would seem to be a problem. Now, of course, Yancey is anecdotal here. I did my own little, very unscientific survey the other day on Twitter. I asked this question: all other things being equal, which of these individuals would most likely make the best neighbor? Evangelical Christian, Catholic Christian, or Mormon LDS? As you can see, the Mormons ran away with it, almost 56%, a significant majority. Evangelical Christians were preferred by only 16.9%. And I'm pretty sure that that 16.9% is mostly, if not completely, evangelical Christian themselves. Given that I think I have a fair number of evangelical Christians that follow me on Twitter and probably responded to this survey, I'm guessing that even among evangelical Christians, many, perhaps even a majority, would rather not have another evangelical living next door to them. Certainly, a vast majority of other respondents would prefer a Mormon or a Catholic. Now, a brief aside about Mormons. I will say that anecdotally again, but for me, of the many Mormons I've met over the years, I've never met a mean Mormon. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but by and large, I would agree with this survey that all things being equal, I'd rather ask to borrow a lawnmower or a weed whacker from my Mormon neighbor than an evangelical Christian neighbor. So what does this mean? What does this say about the way that evangelicals actually relate to truth? Well, I want to suggest that what it says is perhaps evangelicals, they think that they have the truth in one sense. They have propositions that they believe are true. But the evidence might suggest that in a deeper and perhaps in some respects more significant sense, in terms of being people of truth, people conform to that individual Jesus that they believe to be the truth. Perhaps in that sense, they're very much lacking. Now, you might say, yeah, but this is still anecdotal. And like you said, that's not a very scientific survey. Let me just conclude with a few comments from a recent Barna survey. Now, the point here is simply, I do believe that, again, this Barna survey really dovetails with the anecdotal observations of Philip Yancey and with my all too unscientific survey on Twitter. So this is from November 2019, US adults see evangelicals through a political lens. So when they think about evangelicals, they don't think about people, oh, they're just like Jesus. That's the person I want as a neighbor. Rather, they think about a highly politicized person who's focused again on these wedge culture war issues, such as anti-gay marriage or anti-abortion. So I'm just going to skip down. Here we see at the end of this paragraph, common descriptors of evangelicals from all respondents include a mix of favorable descriptions. 23% associate being caring with evangelical, 22% friendly, 22% hopeful, 20% encouraging, but also a lot of unfavorable opinions. 21% narrow-minded, 17% homophobic, 10% misogynistic, and 10% racist. Now, remember that a lot of these respondents who are giving the friendly descriptions are themselves evangelicals responding to the survey. So if we pan down, and now read this last paragraph, along lines of political ideology, the divide is dramatic. Across the board, those who identify as mostly conservative are significantly more likely than those who identify as mostly liberal to view evangelicals positively. Again, considering the conservative leanings of evangelicals, these numbers make sense. Some of the most striking differences surface around whether terms like misogynistic, racist, homophobic, narrow-minded, caring, and hopeful apply to evangelicals. If you are at the liberal end of the spectrum, 26% of the respondents view evangelicals as misogynistic, 25% view them as racist, 41% view them as homophobic, 48% as narrow-minded, a mere 13% as caring, and a mere 12% as hopeful. All right, whoops. Hey, there we go. So from the evangelical perspective, I know that there is a trigger response to explain all this, and it's this. Yeah, well, you're going to get some hostility if you're being faithful to Jesus. Of course, they're going to view us as homophobic because we're preaching the full counsel of God. They're going to view us as not hopeful because they don't hope for the same world that we do in terms of the coming kingdom of God, etc. I would just caution you from those kinds of reactionary defensive postures. It seems to me that Jesus himself, that the people that would have responded to him that did respond to him very positively were not the people on quote unquote his end of the political spectrum. They were the prostitutes, they were the tax collectors, they were the lepers, they were the Samaritans, they were the social undesirables. In other words, people very much outside of the belief community with which he identified, because Jesus most closely really identified with the Pharisees and the general Jewish population in terms of belief and practice. I mean, his understanding of the law in key respects very much overlaps with the Pharisees. It's probably why he was most in debate with the Pharisees. And yet the people that he most attracted were the people from, quote unquote, the other side of the railroad tracks. When it comes to evangelicals today, the people that they most attract are the people from their in-group that already share their political spectrum and their culture war issues. And the people that they alienate appear to be the people that they're putatively intended to reach out to, people from a different political spectrum, a different socioeconomic, cultural, religious perspective. Those are the people who tend to view them as misogynistic, as not hopeful, as what were some of the other descriptors here? narrow-minded, racist, not caring. So it seems to me that despite the fact that evangelicals are so focused upon the branding of truth, that we are people of truth who defend truth, they may have some defense of truth in terms of propositions, defending claims that they think are true. But in terms of being people of truth, in other words, the kind of person you would want as a neighbor, evangelicals seems to me are very far from the truth. And the way that you can see that is simply by asking people who are not part of their in-group, would you like to have them as a neighbor? And generally the answer seems to be no. That would, to me, be a reason that evangelicals should take a step back and ask that hard question. Are we people of truth in the ways that it matters most?